Welcome to today's video. We are going to be making double chocolate sourdough bread. This bread is so good. This is one of our favorites, and I'm going to show you how to make it. So you're first going to go ahead and bloom 50 grams of cocoa powder with 100 grams of warm water. You go ahead and mix this until all the cocoa powder is dissolved. I let it sit for a couple minutes, and once the mixture is nice and smooth, I go ahead and add my starter. I add 150 grams of starter into my bowl, and then I go ahead and add another 300 grams of water. If your dough is too dry, you can go ahead and add an additional 50 grams of water, but usually for me, 300 is enough. So I go ahead and mix all that together until everything is nice and dissolved, or at least most of it. Sometimes there's little tiny pieces of starter left in the mix, but it's totally fine. So now you go ahead and add your sugar. You can use brown sugar for this recipe, but I didn't have any, so I decided to use regular cane sugar, and it literally tasted the exact same. So if you don't have brown sugar, just go ahead and use regular sugar. It's going to taste the same. So I added 50 grams of sugar and mixed it all together again. I also added 13 grams of vanilla, but I forgot to film that part. So I mixed that in as well. Then I added 500 grams of flour. You can use bread flour or all-purpose. I used all-purpose today, and then I used 10 grams of salt. I kind of went a little over, so I cut the clip and I took off some of that salt. But you add 10 grams of salt, and then you mix everything together. So when I mix my dough, I used to have like this dough whisk, and for some reason, the two dough whisks that I owned always like broke for some reason. Like the whisk detached from the wooden part of the handle, I guess. So I started using a regular spatula, and I love using a spatula now. I can mix my dough and it doesn't stick to the whisk or anything, and I just really like it. But if you guys have any dough whisk recommendations, please let me know. I would love to use a dough whisk. So once I have my dough ready, I let it sit on the counter for an hour and I start my stretch and folds. I wet my hands a little bit and I do 4 stretch and folds. I just turn the bowl around, give it a little stretch, turn it again 4 times all the way around. I cover it and then I let it sit for 30 minutes. So I repeat this step an additional 3 times every 30 minutes. So I do 4 stretch and folds. I didn't film myself doing all 4 stretch and folds, but this is basically it. So I let it bulk ferment on the counter overnight because it is getting cold where I live right now, and it was perfect in the morning. So in the morning, I decided to just shape it and add my chocolate chips then. Some people put the chocolate chips while you're doing the stretch and folds, but I don't do that. I don't know. It's just harder for me to do the stretch and folds. So this is when I know that my dough is ready. I can go ahead and poke it and it doesn't stick to my fingers. So now I go ahead and put it on my mat on my table and I start to shape it and add the chocolate chips. So I scrape my bowl with this bench scraper, I'm not sure, plastic scraper, silicone scraper, I'm not sure, but it does its job. I love it. And now I'm gonna stretch my dough a little bit on this mat, and once I get it to my desired length, I guess, some people stretch it really far out. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I don't really do that. I just kind of stretch it enough so I can add my inclusions. So I add the chocolate chips everywhere on the dough, and then you're gonna see how I roll my dough. So usually some people usually just fold the sides towards the center, and then they just roll the center to the back, and then they just continue shaping. But when I do inclusions, for some reason, the inclusions, when I do that, they just like stay on top. So what I decided to do, and I started experimenting and it works, I kind of roll my dough like if it was a cinnamon roll, obviously thicker and bigger, but I just kind of roll it and I add more chocolate chips and then I roll it again. And I've noticed that my chocolate chips or inclusions of any kind, they get distributed better when I bake it. So if you want to give it a try, go ahead. If you're having the same problem as me, this works for me. So I know maybe it might be weird for some people, but it works. So now I'm just going to finish shaping my dough. As you can tell, my dough is not sticking to my hands at all. I barely put any flour on the mat. So I don't know. I love this dough. I don't know if it's because of the sugar or the extra cocoa powder. I'm not sure, but I love shaping this dough. So you go ahead and finish shaping it. I add a little bit of flour on top just so the dough doesn't stick to the cloth that I put in my banneton. So you can leave this dough to proof overnight, like do the bulk ferment overnight in the fridge. Usually I do that when I mix my dough in the morning and it's done by the evening. But this time I let my dough sit overnight. So I just put it in the fridge and I put it in the fridge for an hour or two. And then I decided to bake. But you can definitely leave it, for a few hours or a full day, so it can finish like bulk fermenting in the fridge. But I don't know, this dough tends to rise so much. So I just decided to bake it and my kids really wanted some after school. So I wanted to surprise them and have it ready. So after the hour, I did the scoring on my bread. I did a simple score, just across, and then I go ahead and put it in the oven. It's going to go in the oven at 450 for 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, I'm going to take off the lid and lower the temperature down to 400 degrees. And I'm going to leave it in there for 40 minutes. I'm going to leave this recipe and all the instructions in the description for you guys. But look at my bread. It came out so beautiful. The chocolate chips always pop through when, the bread expands, and it's so good. And there's chocolate chips everywhere. And it's so soft. It's so warm. And, it's so gooey, like the little chocolate chips. So it's so hard to wait until this bread cools down. But I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe and give it a try. Let me know if you try it. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.